Hashtag telling an alien vampire woman she had a nice ass led to the most unbelievable reaction. Marcus Chun had always been terrible at first impressions. Back on Earth, his mouth had gotten him into more trouble than his engineering degree had gotten him out of. So when he found himself aboard the interstellar trading vessel Nexus Prime, working as a maintenance technician for the Galactic Commerce Guild, he promised himself he'd keep his head down and his mouth shut. That promise lasted exactly 3 weeks. The Nexus Prime was a massive ship, nearly 2 kilometers long, designed to carry goods and passengers between the core worlds of the Galactic Federation. Marcus had never seen anything like it during his time on Earth. The corridors stretched endlessly, filled with beings from dozens of different species. There were the tall, graceful Etherians with their translucent skin and silver hair. The stocky, 4-armed Kornak traders with their chittering language. Even a few of the mysterious Void Walkers, wrapped in their environmental suits that hid their true forms. But it was the Sanguinari that caught everyone's attention. Marcus first saw her in the ship's central marketplace, a vast chamber that served as both trading post and social hub. She moved through the crowd like liquid shadow, her pale skin almost glowing under the artificial lights. Her hair was deep black, cascading down her back in waves that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. She wore a form-fitting black outfit that left little to the imagination, and Marcus found his engineering-focused brain suddenly very interested in non-technical matters. The Sanguinari were relatively new to galactic society. They'd only made contact 5 years ago, emerging from the dark edges of known space with technology that made even the advanced Federation species take notice. They were humanoid in appearance, but with several key differences. Their skin was pale, almost white, with visible veins that pulsed with a faint red glow. Their eyes were completely black, no iris or pupil visible, and they had an aura about them that made other species uncomfortable. They called themselves energy feeders, sustaining themselves by absorbing life force from willing donors. The process was apparently pleasurable for both parties, which had led to some interesting diplomatic arrangements. Most species found them unsettling, earning them the nickname space vampires among human traders. Marcus watched her browse the stalls, noting how other shoppers gave her a wide berth. Vendors who were haggling loudly with other customers suddenly became quiet and respectful when she approached. She seemed completely unbothered by the reaction, moving with confident grace that spoke of someone accustomed to being both feared and desired. He was so busy watching her that he didn't notice the maintenance alert on his comm unit until it started beeping insistently. Section 7G had a coolant leak that needed immediate attention. Marcus sighed, gathered his tools, and headed for the maintenance corridors that ran parallel to the main thoroughfares. The leak turned out to be worse than reported. Some idiot had tried to jury-rig a connection between 2 incompatible systems, and the result was a steady drip of highly corrosive coolant that was eating through the deck plating. Marcus spent the better part of 3 hours rerouting connections and installing proper adapters. By the time he finished, his coveralls were soaked with sweat and stained with various fluids. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and he was pretty sure he smelled like a combination of machine oil and chemical solvents. All he wanted was a shower and his narrow bunk in the crew quarters. He emerged from a maintenance hatch directly into the main corridor, right as the Sanguinari woman was walking past. Time seemed to slow as Marcus watched her approach. She moved with that same fluid grace he'd observed in the marketplace. But up close, the effect was even more pronounced. Her black outfit hugged every curve, and Marcus found his tired brain fixating on the way the fabric stretched across her perfectly shaped posterior. Their eyes met as she passed, and Marcus felt something electric pass between them. Her completely black eyes seemed to look right through him, and for a moment, he forgot how to breathe. "Nice ass," he said. The words tumbled out of his mouth before his exhausted brain could engage any kind of filter. He immediately felt his face flush red with embarrassment and horror. Had he really just catcalled an alien vampire woman? His mother would have been mortified. Hell, he was mortified. The Sanguinari woman stopped walking. Marcus waited for the angry response, the security alert, or possibly just to be drained of his life force right there in the corridor. Instead, she turned around slowly, a look of genuine confusion on her face. "I apologize," she said in perfect, unaccented Standard Galactic. "Could you repeat that? I believe there may have been a translation error." Marcus wanted to disappear into the deck plating. I said you have a nice posterior. Your rear end. It's aesthetically pleasing." The confusion on her face deepened. "You were commenting on my physical form?" "Yes, and I'm really sorry. That was incredibly inappropriate, and I wait." She held up a hand, her black eyes widening slightly. "You find my physical form attractive?" Marcus nodded miserably, waiting for whatever consequence was about to befall him. What happened next was the last thing he expected. The Sanguinari woman's pale face flushed a deep red color, the veins under her skin pulsing more brightly. She looked down at herself, then back at Marcus, then down again. Her mouth opened and closed several times without producing sound. That is, no one has ever," she stammered. Then, to Marcus's complete astonishment, she smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile that transformed her entire face. When she smiled, he could see that her teeth were perfectly normal, not the fangs he'd half expected. "Thank you," she said softly. "That is unexpectedly kind." Marcus blinked. "You're not angry?" "Angry? Why would I be angry about receiving a compliment?" She tilted her head slightly. "Though I must admit, your approach is rather direct." "Yeah, that's kind of my problem. I don't really have a filter between my brain and my mouth." She laughed then, a sound like silver bells. "I find that refreshing. Most beings are so careful around my kind. They measure every word, watch every gesture. It becomes quite tedious. Your kind gets at a lot, huh?" Her expression grew slightly sad. "The Sanguinari are not well understood by galactic society. We are feared, sometimes desired, but rarely seen as simply people." Marcus looked at her more closely. Despite her otherworldly appearance, there was something very human in her expression. Something lonely. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lyralii of House Nightshade." "And you are?" "Marcus Chun. I'm a maintenance tech here on the ship." He gestured to his stained coveralls. Obviously, she agreed, but her tone was amused rather than dismissive. They stood there in the corridor for a moment, an awkward silence stretching between them. Marcus was acutely aware that other passengers were walking around them, some staring openly at the unusual pairing of the human maintenance worker and the Sanguinari noble. "I should probably get going," Marcus said finally. "Let you get on with your whatever it is you were doing." "Actually," Lyralii said quickly, "I was simply exploring the ship. I have never been aboard a vessel this large before. Perhaps, would you be willing to show me around? You would know it better than most." Marcus stared at her. "You want me to give you a tour?" "If you're not too busy." Marcus thought about his narrow bunk and the shower he desperately needed. Then, he looked at Lyralii's hopeful expression and found himself nodding. "Sure. I mean, I should probably clean up first. I'm kind of a mess." "I do not mind," she said. "In fact, I find the evidence of honest work rather appealing." And that's how Marcus found himself giving an impromptu tour of the Nexus Prime to one of the galaxy's most mysterious species, all because he'd complimented her ass. As they walked through the ship's various sections, Marcus found Lyralii to be surprisingly easy to talk to. She asked intelligent questions about the ship's systems and seemed genuinely interested in how everything worked. She laughed at his terrible jokes and didn't seem bothered by his tendency to ramble when discussing technical subjects. "The artificial gravity system is actually pretty fascinating," Marcus was saying as they stood in one of the observation lounges, looking out at the stars streaming past. "Most people don't realize how complex it is to maintain consistent gravity across a ship this size, especially when you factor in the rotation and—" He trailed off, realizing that Lyralii was staring at him with an odd expression. "What?" he asked. "You are quite passionate about your work," she observed. Marcus felt his cheeks warm. "Sorry, I know it's boring to most people. It is not boring at all. I was simply thinking that it has been a long time since someone spoke to me about something other than my species' feeding habits or our diplomatic status." "What do you mean?" Lyralii sighed. "When the Sanguinari joined the Galactic Federation, I was chosen as our cultural ambassadors. Most of my conversations involve explaining our customs to species who find us either terrifying or exotic. It becomes rather repetitive." "That sounds exhausting." "It is, which is why your directness was so refreshing. You saw me as simply a woman worthy of admiration, not as a representative of an entire species. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. Well, I mean, you're definitely worthy of admiration. I just probably could have expressed that in a more tactful way. Lyralii stepped closer to him, and Marcus caught a hint of her scent. She smelled like night-blooming flowers and something else he couldn't identify, something that made his pulse quicken. Marcus, she said softly, would you be terribly offended if I told you that you have very kind eyes? Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. No, I wouldn't be offended at all. Good, because I've been thinking about them since we began walking. They stood there in the starlight, and Marcus realized that something significant had just happened. He'd stumbled into a connection with someone he never should have met, all because of his complete inability to keep his thoughts to himself. Lyralii, he said carefully, I know this might sound crazy, but would you maybe want to have dinner with me sometime? I mean, if sanguinari eat regular food. I realize I don't actually know much about your dietary requirements. She smiled that transformative smile again. We do consume regular food, though our nutritional needs are supplemented through other means. And yes, Marcus-chun, I would very much like to have dinner with you. As they made plans to meet the following evening, Marcus couldn't help but think that sometimes his big mouth actually worked out in his favor. He had no idea that this chance encounter would lead to the most incredible adventure of his life, one that would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about humans, sanguinari, and the nature of connection itself. But for now, he was just a maintenance tech who had somehow managed to ask out the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, alien vampire or not. And surprisingly, she had said yes. Marcus spent the next day in a state that could only be described as control panic. He had a date with Lyralii, and he had absolutely no idea what he was doing. The crew quarters aboard the Nexus Prime weren't exactly designed for romance. Marcus shared a small cabin with 2 other maintenance workers, and his wardrobe consisted entirely of coveralls and a few basic off-duty clothes. He stared at his reflection in the tiny mirror above his sink, trying to make his unruly hair cooperate. You look like you're about to throw up, observed Jake Morrison, his bunkmate. Jake was a grizzled veteran of the merchant fleet, with more years in space than Marcus had been alive. I might, Marcus admitted. I have no idea what I'm doing. It's just a dinner date, kid. How hard can it be? It's not just a dinner date. It's a dinner date with a sanguinari. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. You asked out one of the vampires? Jesus. Marcus, you really don't do anything halfway, do you? She's not a vampire. They're energy feeders. There's a difference. Uh-huh. And you know this because you're suddenly an expert on alien physiology? Marcus turned away from the mirror to face his friend. I know this because I actually talked to her like a person instead of treating her like some kind of monster. Jake raised his hands in surrender. Hey, no judgment here. I'm just saying, maybe do a little research before you go getting yourself emotionally attached to someone whose species you don't understand. It was good advice, Marcus had to admit. He spent the rest of his shift reading everything he could find about sanguinari culture and biology. What he learned was both fascinating and slightly terrifying. The sanguinari were indeed energy feeders, but the process was far more complex than most species understood. They could sustain themselves on regular food, but they required periodic feeding on life energy to maintain their health and abilities. The feeding process involved physical contact and was apparently quite intimate, creating a temporary bond between feeder and donor. More importantly, sanguinari were a deeply emotional species. They formed strong attachments quickly and considered betrayal of trust to be the ultimate sin. They were also incredibly long-lived, with lifespans measured in centuries rather than decades. The more Marcus read, the more he realized how little he understood about what he was getting himself into. But when he thought about Lyralii's smile, about the loneliness he'd seen in her black eyes, he found he didn't care. He met her in the ship's main restaurant, an upscale establishment that catered to the diverse dietary needs of dozens of species. Marcus had never eaten there before, having always stuck to the crew cafeteria, but Lyralii had insisted on paying. She was waiting for him at a corner table, wearing a deep red dress that complemented her pale skin beautifully. When she saw him approach, she stood and smiled, and Marcus felt his nervousness evaporate. "You look very handsome," she said as he sat down across from her. Marcus looked down at his best shirt and clean pants. "Thanks." You look incredible. I mean, you always look incredible, but tonight especially. She laughed, that same musical sound he'd heard in the corridor. Your honesty remains charming. The dinner started well enough. They talked about their backgrounds, their work, their experiences traveling through space. Lyralii told him about her home world, a planet with two suns that never set, creating eternal twilight. Marcus described Earth, trying to convey the beauty of sunrises and changing seasons to someone who had never experienced them. But as the evening progressed, Marcus became aware that they were attracting attention. Other diners kept glancing in their direction, some with curiosity, others with disapproval. A table of Kornak traders was having an animated discussion in their chittering language, clearly about the unusual pairing. Does this happen a lot? Marcus asked quietly. More often than I would like, Lyralii admitted. The Sanguinari are still new to galactic society. Many species are unsure how to react to us. It doesn't bother you. I have learned to ignore it. Though I confess, it is easier when I have such pleasant company. Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of a tall, elegant Etherian. Marcus recognized him as Ambassador Veltar, one of the Federation's senior diplomatic representatives aboard the ship. Lady Lyralii, the ambassador said with a formal bow. I hope you're enjoying your evening. I am, thank you, Lyralii replied, her tone becoming noticeably cooler. Veltar's pale, eyes shifted to Marcus. And you must be the human maintenance worker I have heard about. There was something in his tone that Marcus didn't like. That would be me. Marcus Chun. How interesting. Lady Lyralii, I was hoping we might discuss the upcoming trade negotiations. Perhaps you would join me for a more appropriate dinner companion. The insult was barely veiled, and Marcus felt his temper flare. But before he could respond, Lyralii stood gracefully. Ambassador Veltar, she said, her voice carrying a subtle edge that made the temperature at the table seem to drop several degrees. I am currently enjoying a personal meal with a friend. Any business discussions can wait until normal diplomatic hours. Of course, Veltar said, though his expression suggested he was anything but pleased. I simply thought you might prefer the company of someone more suitable to your station. My choice of companions is not subject to diplomatic review, Lyralii replied firmly. Now, if you will excuse us, the ambassador left, but not before shooting Marcus a look that promised future trouble. As soon as he was gone, Lyralii sat back down, her composure intact but her eyes flashing with anger. I'm sorry about that, she said. Some members of the Federation seem to believe they have input into my personal life. Why? Marcus asked. I mean, you're a cultural ambassador, not a prisoner. The situation is complicated. The Sanguinari are valuable allies, but we are also viewed with suspicion. There are those who believe that controlling our movements and associations is necessary for galactic security. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying you're not free to choose who you spend time with? I'm saying that my choices have consequences beyond just my own happiness. The rest of dinner passed in a subdued mood. Marcus found himself hyper-aware of every glance, every whisper from other tables. By the time they finished eating, he was questioning whether he had any right to pursue a relationship that might cause problems for Lyralii. As they walked back through the ship's corridors, Lyralii seemed to sense his mood. You are thinking very loudly, she observed. It's just, I don't want to make things difficult for you. She stopped walking and turned to face him. Marcus, may I ask you something? Of course. When you first complimented me, what were you thinking about? Marcus felt his cheeks warm. Honestly, I wasn't thinking at all. I saw something beautiful, and my mouth engaged before my brain did. And now? What are you thinking now? Marcus looked at her, taking in her pale beauty, her black eyes, the way the corridor lights caught the red undertones of her dress. I'm thinking that I like you. A lot. More than I probably should after one dinner. And the fact that I am Sanguinari, that my species frightens others. I'm thinking that anyone who's frightened of you hasn't taken the time to actually know you. Lyralii stepped closer to him, close enough that he could feel the coolness of her skin. Marcus, there are things about my kind that you do not yet understand. Things that could complicate any relationship between us. Like what? We form bonds differently than most species. When a Sanguinari chooses a companion, it is not a casual decision. We are capable of deep, lasting connections that transcend typical emotional attachment. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. And that's bad because once formed, such bonds are very difficult to break. And because there are those who would see any such connection as a threat to galactic stability. They stood there in the corridor, the weight of unspoken possibilities hanging between them. Marcus knew he was standing at a crossroads. He could walk away now, return to his simple life as a maintenance tech, and avoid whatever complications might arise from pursuing this attraction. Or he could take a leap of faith. Lyralii, he said softly, I'm not asking for any promises or commitments. I'm just asking if you'd like to spend more time together. See where this goes. She studied his face for a long moment. You realize that associating with me could affect your position aboard this ship? Your career prospects? My career prospects involve fixing broken pipes and replacing worn-out components for the rest of my life. I think I can handle a little uncertainty. Lyralii smiled then, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest, something that told him he was already in deeper than he'd realized. Very well, she said, but I must warn you, Marcus Chun, my people do not love lightly. Are you prepared for that possibility? Marcus thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Yeah, I think I am. What he didn't know was that their conversation had been monitored by Ambassador Veltar, who was already composing a report to the Federation Council about the security implications of a human-sanguinary relationship. What he also didn't know was that Lyralii's own people had been watching her interactions with interest, and that her growing attachment to a human would soon create ripples throughout the sanguinary hierarchy. But, for now, walking through the corridors of the Nexus Prime with Lyralii's hand in his, Marcus was content to be blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing around them. Sometimes ignorance really was bliss, at least for a little while. As they reached the lift that would take them to their respective quarters, Lyralii turned to him one more time. Marcus, she said, tomorrow evening, would you like to see something that very few non-sanguinari have ever witnessed? What's that? How we truly feed. If you're going to understand my people, you must understand all aspects of our nature. Marcus felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with anticipation. Is it dangerous? Not dangerous, no. But it will change how you see me. How you see us. Are you willing? Marcus looked into her black eyes and saw the vulnerability there, the hope and fear mingled together. He realized that she was offering him something precious, her trust. Yes, he said without hesitation. I'm willing. As the lift doors closed between them, Marcus wondered what exactly he'd just agreed to. But one thing was certain. His simple life as a maintenance worker was about to become far more complicated than he'd ever imagined. Marcus spent the next day trying to focus on his work, but his mind kept wandering to Lyralii's invitation. Every technical manual he'd read about sanguinary feeding had been vague on details, describing only as an intimate energy exchange. He had no idea what to expect. His distraction nearly cost him a finger when he caught his hand in a plasma conduit access panel. Jake Morrison, working nearby, shook his head in exasperation. You've been useless all day, Jake observed. Whatever that vampire lady has planned for you tonight, you better get your head on straight before you hurt yourself. She's not a vampire, Marcus replied automatically, sucking on his injured finger. Right. Energy feeder. Whatever you want to call her, she's got you twisted up in knots. Marcus couldn't deny that. As the day wore on, he found himself alternating between excitement and terror. What if the feeding process was something he couldn't handle? What if it changed how he felt about Lyralii? What if it changed how she felt about him? He met her that evening in a part of the ship he'd never been to before, the diplomatic quarters reserved for high-ranking passengers. Lyralii's suite was elegant and spacious, decorated with artwork from her homeworld. Soft, ambient lighting created an atmosphere of intimacy that made Marcus's heart race. Thank you for coming, she said as she led him inside. She was wearing a simple black dress that seemed to float around her like liquid shadow. I know this must be strange for you. A little, Marcus admitted. I'll be honest, I'm not sure what to expect. Lyralii gestured for him to sit on a comfortable chair near the center of the room. The process of feeding is different for each sanguinari, she explained, moving to stand before him. Some of my people prefer multiple donors, taking small amounts from many sources. Others, like myself, prefer a deeper connection with a single donor. Marcus swallowed hard. And I want to be your donor. Only if you consent. The feeding must be voluntary, or it provides no nourishment. Forced feeding is not only morally abhorrent to us, it is physically impossible. What exactly does it involve? Lyralii sat down across from him, her black eyes serious. I will need to touch you. Skin-to-skin contact. The energy transfer occurs through physical connection, and the process is intense for both parties. Intense how? It is difficult to describe to someone who has never experienced it. Imagine the most euphoric feeling you have ever had, magnified tenfold. Some species describe it as transcendent. Others find it overwhelming. Marcus studied her face. What about you? What do you experience? For me, it is like coming alive after being half dead. The energy flows into me, warm and bright, and she paused, seeming to search for words. With you, I suspect it will be even more powerful than usual. Why? Because of the connection we have already formed. Emotional bonds amplify the feeding process significantly. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Lyralii, are you saying you have feelings for me? She looked away, and Marcus was surprised to see what might have been a blush on her pale cheeks. Perhaps we should proceed with the feeding first. Such discussions can wait. Marcus reached out and took her hand, feeling the coolness of her skin. Actually, I think those discussions are pretty important. I need to know where I stand. Lyralii looked back at him, and Marcus saw vulnerability in her expression that took his breath away. Marcus, she said softly, among my people, feeding from someone creates a bond. It is not casual or temporary. If I feed from you, you will become part of me in a way that is difficult to explain. And if I become part of you, then you'll be under the protection of House Nightshade for as long as you live. But you will also become a target for those who oppose sanguinary integration into galactic society. Marcus felt a chill. What kind of target? There are factions within the Federation who believe that humans are too primitive to safely interact with sanguinari. They think your species lacks the emotional sophistication to handle our bonding processes. That's ridiculous. Is it? Marcus, you have known me for 2 days. Are you prepared to form a bond that could last centuries? The question hung in the air between them. Marcus thought about his simple life, his quiet career, his modest goals. Then, he thought about the loneliness he'd seen in Lyralii's eyes, about the way she'd lit up when he'd spoken to her like a person rather than a diplomatic entity. I don't know if I'm prepared, he said finally, but I know I want to try. Lyralii studied his face for a long moment. Then she stood and moved closer to him, close enough that he could feel the subtle energy that seemed to radiate from her skin. Very well, she said. But first, you must understand what you are truly agreeing to. She placed her hand on his chest, just over his heart. Immediately, Marcus felt a strange, tingling sensation, as if tiny electrical currents were running through his body. This is what the preliminary connection feels like, Lyralii explained. If we proceed, the sensation will become much more intense. Marcus looked down at her hand, then back up at her face. The tingling was not unpleasant, just unusual. It reminded him of the moment before lightning struck, when the air itself seemed charged with potential. I'm okay with it, he said. Lyralii nodded and moved both hands to his face, cupping his cheeks. The tingling intensified, spreading from the points of contact throughout his entire body. Marcus felt his breathing quicken, not from fear, but from a strange excitement he couldn't quite identify. The full feeding requires complete trust, Lyralii whispered. You must be willing to open yourself to me completely, to let me see not just your energy, but your emotions, your memories, your very essence. Marcus realized what she was asking. It wasn't just about feeding. It was about allowing her complete access to who he was as a person. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, he found himself nodding. I trust you, he said. Lyralii's eyes widened slightly, and Marcus realized that she hadn't been expecting such ready acceptance. Marcus, you don't understand. I will see everything. Every memory, every fear, every secret thought you've ever had. Are you truly prepared for such intimacy? Marcus thought about it. He wasn't a complicated person. He had no dark secrets, no terrible shames to hide. His life had been ordinary, sometimes disappointingly so. If Lyralii wanted to see all of that ordinariness, he was willing to share it. Yes, he said firmly. I'm prepared. Something shifted in Lyraliai's expression, a mixture of amazement and something that might have been relief. "Very well," she whispered. "Close your eyes." Marcus closed his eyes and felt Lyraliai's hands move to the sides of his neck. The tingling sensation exploded into something far more intense, a wave of energy that seemed to flow from every point of contact. But it wasn't painful or overwhelming as he'd feared. Instead, it felt like coming home. He could sense Lyraliai's presence in his mind, gentle but thorough, exploring his memories with careful respect. He felt her surprise at the simple kindness that seemed to permeate most of his recollections. His childhood on Earth, his relationship with his parents, his genuine care for the people around him. And as she explored his mind, he began to sense hers as well. The loneliness that had haunted her for decades. The weight of representing her entire species to a galaxy that feared them. The desperate hope that somewhere, somehow, she might find acceptance and connection. The energy flow between them intensified, and Marcus felt something extraordinary happening. It was as if two separate entities were becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. He could feel Lyraliai's wonder and gratitude mixing with his own growing affection and protectiveness. When the feeding finally ended, they were both breathing heavily. Lyraliai's pale skin now had a healthy glow, and her black eyes seemed to shimmer with inner light. But more than that, Marcus could still feel her presence in the back of his mind, like a warm echo of the connection they just shared. That was... Marcus started to say, then realized he had no words for what had just happened. "Unprecedented," Lyraliai finished softly. "Marcus, I have fed from dozens of donors over the years, but never anything like that. The depth of connection, the emotional resonance, it's extraordinary." Marcus reached up to touch her face, marveling at how right it felt. "I can still feel you. Is that normal?" "No, it is not normal at all. What we just experienced is what my people call soul bond. It occurs perhaps once in a century, and never with an alien species." "Is that bad?" Lyraliai smiled, and Marcus realized that he could actually feel her happiness radiating through their connection. "No, Marcus Chen. It is wonderful, but it also means that everything has changed." "Change how?" "We are now bonded in a way that my people consider sacred. You're no longer just a human who has shown interest in me. You are my chosen companion, blessed by the ancient energies that flow through all Sanguinari." Marcus felt a flutter of nervousness. "And what does that mean practically?" "It means that the political complications I warned you about have just become much more severe. A simple romantic relationship between species might be overlooked, but a soul bond?" Lyraliai shook her head. "That will be seen as a threat by those who wish to keep the species separated." As if summoned by her words, Marcus's comm unit suddenly chimed with an urgent message. Then Lyraliai's did the same. Then both of their units began chiming continuously as message after message poured in. "What the hell?" Marcus muttered, checking his display. The messages were all variations on the same theme. "Report to Security Chief Valdris immediately." All of them. Lyraliai's face had gone pale. "They know," she whispered. "Somehow they know about the bond." "How is that possible?" "Soul bonds create energy signatures that can be detected by sensitive equipment. If someone was monitoring..." She trailed off, her eyes widening with realization. "We have been betrayed." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the door to her quarters chimed. Not the gentle chime of a visitor, but the sharp, demanding sound of security override. "Lady Lyraliai," came a voice through the comm system. "This is Security Chief Valdris. Please open the door immediately." Lyraliai looked at Marcus, and through their newfound connection, he could feel her fear and anger in equal measure. "What do we do?" he asked quietly. Lyraliai stood, straightening her dress and adopting a regal bearing that reminded Marcus that she was nobility among her people. "We face this together," she said firmly. "Whatever consequences arise from our bond, we will handle them as partners." Marcus stood as well, taking her hand. Through their connection, he could feel her drawing strength from his presence, just as he was drawing courage from hers. Together, he agreed. As Lyraliai moved to open the door, neither of them could have imagined the galaxy-spanning consequences that their simple bond would unleash. The Sanguinari had very specific ideas about what constituted a threat to their bonded companions, and the Federation was about to learn exactly how protective they could be. Security Chief Valdris entered the room with 3 armed guards, his Kornak features set in what Marcus had learned to recognize as their version of grim determination. The 4-armed alien's chittering language was replaced by heavily accented Standard Galactic as he addressed them formally. Lady Lyrelii of House Nightshade, Human Technician Marcus Chun, you are both under detention pending investigation into unauthorized xenobiological interaction. Marcus felt anger flare through the bond connection. But it wasn't his anger. Lyrelii's emotional state was shifting into something dangerous, and he could feel power building around her like a gathering storm. On whose authority? Lyrelii's voice was deadly calm, but Marcus could sense the fury beneath it. The authority of the Galactic Federation Council, acting on intelligence provided by Ambassador Veltar. Valdris gestured to his guards. You will both come with us immediately. I think not, Lyrelii replied softly. What happened next would later be described by witnesses as the most terrifying display of sanguinary power ever recorded aboard a civilian vessel. The lights in the room dimmed as energy began to flow around Lyrelii like visible shadows. Her eyes went from black to a burning red, and Marcus could feel raw power radiating from her through their bond. When she spoke again, her voice carried harmonics that made the metal walls vibrate. I am Lyrelii, first daughter of House Nightshade, keeper of the ancient ways, and bearer of the blood crown. This human is under my protection through bonds sealed by the old powers. You will not touch him. The guards raised their weapons, but Marcus watched in amazement as the energy weapons simply failed to function in Lyrelii's presence. The power cells drained instantly, leaving them holding useless metal. Security Chief Valdris began chittering rapidly in his native language, clearly calling for backup. Lyrelii, Marcus said quietly, we should go with them. Fighting will only make things worse. Through their bond, he could feel her struggle to control the power flowing through her. Marcus, you do not understand. If they separate us now, if they declare our bond illegal, they could justify any action against you, including termination. Termination? Marcus felt ice in his veins. You mean they might kill me? There are factions within the Federation who believe that humans who bond with Sanguinari become security threats. They think the bond process somehow compromises human judgment or loyalty. Before Marcus could respond, Ambassador Veltar strode into the room, flanked by additional security personnel. His pale Etherian features were set in a mask of righteous indignation. Lady Lyrelii, you will cease this display immediately. Your actions are confirming every suspicion about sanguinary compatibility with civilized society. The power radiating from Lyrelii intensified. My actions, Ambassador, are protecting my bonded companion from illegal persecution. The Federation Charter specifically protects the right of sentient beings to form consensual relationships, not when those relationships compromise galactic security, Veltar replied coldly. The human has been exposed to sanguinary bonding processes without proper psychological screening. He may no longer be capable of rational thought. Marcus felt something snap inside him. It wasn't the supernatural power that Lyrelii commanded, just good old-fashioned human anger. Hey, Ambassador, he said, stepping forward despite the weapons pointed at him. I'm standing right here. Why don't you ask me if I'm capable of rational thought instead of talking about me like I'm not in the room? Veltar's pale eyes focused on him with obvious distaste. Very well, human. Do you understand that you have been subjected to alien mental manipulation? That your feelings for this creature are not genuine, but the result of psychic influence? Marcus felt Lyrelii's pain through their bond at the word creature, but also her curiosity about how he would respond. Ambassador, Marcus said, fighting to keep his voice level. With all due respect, you're full of shit. Several of the guards made alarmed, chittering sounds, and Veltar's translucent skin flushed darker. I beg your pardon? I said you're full of shit. I've been attracted to Lyrelii since the moment I first saw her, before I ever knew what a sanguinari was, before any bonding process. She's beautiful, intelligent, funny, and she treats me like I matter. If you think I need psychic manipulation to appreciate those qualities, then you clearly don't understand humans very well. Ambassador Veltar stepped closer, his expression becoming more threatening. Human, you are speaking to a senior diplomatic representative of the Galactic Federation. You will show proper respect. Respect is earned, Marcus shot back. And so far, all you've done is insult my girlfriend and threaten my life. So no, I won't be showing you any respect. The room fell silent. Through his bond with Lyralii, Marcus could feel her amazement and something that felt very much like pride. Security Chief Valdris broke the silence. Ambassador, we have reports of Sanguinari vessels approaching the ship. 3 heavy cruisers, bearing the markings of House Nightshade. Veltar spun to face Lyralii. You called for military intervention? I did not, Lyralii replied, though Marcus could sense she wasn't entirely surprised. But the bonds between Sanguinari run deeper than you understand. When one of our bloodline is threatened, others respond. Marcus's comm unit chimed with an incoming message. So did everyone else's in the room. The voice that came through the speakers was female, speaking accented standard galactic with unmistakable authority. This is Duchess Saralay of House Nightshade, commander of the Sanguinari fleet. We have detected a soul bond formation involving my daughter, Lyralii. Any interference with this bond will be considered an act of war against the Sanguinari people. Ambassador Veltar went very pale, even for an Etherian. Soul bond? That's impossible. Soul bonds haven't been recorded for over a century. Apparently, Lyralii said with satisfaction, you need to update your records. The comm system crackled again. Nexus Prime, you will release Lady Lyralii and her bonded companion immediately, or we will board your vessel and retrieve them ourselves. Marcus felt a mix of awe and terror. 3 warships were threatening an entire passenger liner because of him. Because he'd complimented an alien woman's ass and somehow ended up soul-bonded to alien royalty. This is insane, he muttered. Security Chief Aldris was chittering rapidly into his own comm unit, clearly receiving orders from the ship's captain. After several minutes of back and forth, he looked up with obvious reluctance. Ambassador, Captain's orders. We are to release both subjects immediately. Veltar's face twisted with anger. This is a mistake. The Federation Council will hear about this. I'm sure they will, Lyralii replied smoothly. And I'm sure my mother will be happy to discuss the matter with them. The Duchess does so enjoy diplomatic negotiations. As the security team reluctantly withdrew, Marcus caught Lyralii's hand. Your mother is a Duchess? He asked. I may have neglected to mention that I am 3rd in line for the Sanguinari throne, Lyralii admitted. It seemed irrelevant at the time. Marcus stared at her. I'm bonded to alien royalty. Technically, you're bonded to me. The royalty is just a bonus. Before Marcus could respond, the ship's intercom system activated with an announcement from the captain. Attention all passengers and crew. The Nexus Prime has been granted safe passage by the Sanguinari fleet. We will be escorted to the nearest Federation station, where Lady Lyralii and her companion will be transferred to Sanguinari custody for their protection. Marcus felt his knees go weak. Transferred to Sanguinari custody? What does that mean? Through their bond, he could sense Lyralii's mixed emotions. Relief, excitement, but also apprehension. It means, Marcus Chun, that you're about to meet my family. And they're going to have many questions about the human who managed to form a soul bond with their daughter. As if on cue, Marcus's comm unit chimed with a personal message. The message was brief, but formal. Marcus Chun, you are invited to present yourself before the Sanguinari High Council to discuss the nature of your bond with Lady Lyralii. This invitation is not optional. Marcus sank into a chair, the magnitude of his situation finally hitting him. 3 days ago, he'd been a simple maintenance technician. Now he was apparently involved in interstellar diplomacy and had somehow managed to attract the attention of what sounded like the Sanguinari government. Lyralii, he said weakly. When you said my choices would have consequences, I don't think either of us imagined they'd involve warships. Lyralii sat beside him, taking his hand. Through their bond, he could feel her trying to send him comfort and reassurance. Marcus, I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to know that whatever happens, I will not let any harm come to you. The bond between us is sacred to my people. They may question it, they may test it, but they will protect it. What kind of tests? I honestly don't know. Soul bonds are so rare that there are no established protocols. We are about to make history together, one way or another. Marcus looked out the viewport at the stars and tried to process what his life had become. In the distance, he could see the running lights of the Sanguinari escort vessels, massive shapes that dwarfed even the enormous Nexus Prime. You know, he said finally, when I complimented your ass, I really wasn't expecting it to lead to an interstellar incident. Lyralii laughed, the sound bright and musical even through her nervousness. Neither was I, Marcus-chun. Neither was I. As the Nexus Prime altered course toward the transfer point, Marcus realized that his simple life was truly over. Whatever came next would be completely beyond his experience or imagination. But, looking at Lyralii, feeling the warmth of their bond, he found that he wasn't afraid. He was curious. And if there was one thing his career as a maintenance tech had taught him, it was that curiosity usually led to interesting discoveries. He had a feeling that the most interesting discoveries of his life were just beginning. The transfer to the Sanguinari flagship was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. The ship itself was a work of art, its black hull seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. The interior was elegant and sophisticated, with flowing curves and soft lighting that made everything look like it belonged in a palace rather than a starship. Marcus and Lyralii were escorted through corridors filled with Sanguinari crew members, all of whom stopped to stare at the human who had somehow bonded with their princess. Marcus tried to ignore the attention, but it was hard to miss the mixture of curiosity and concern on their pale faces. They were brought to a magnificent chamber that served as both audience hall and meeting room. At the far end, on a raised dais, sat three figures that Marcus immediately recognized as important. The central figure was clearly Lyralii's mother, Duchess Saralay. She shared her daughter's pale beauty, but carried herself with the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to command. To her left sat an ancient-looking Sanguinari male whose eyes seemed to hold the weight of centuries. To her right, a younger male who radiated barely contained power and whose expression suggested he was not at all pleased with the current situation. Lyralii, first daughter of my house, the Duchess said, her voice carrying formal weight. Approach and present your bonded companion. Lyralii walked forward with Marcus at her side, her hand firmly gripping his. Marcus could feel her nervousness through their bond, but also her determination to protect him. Mother, Lyralii said formally, I present Marcus, Chun of Earth, he who has been chosen by the ancient powers to share in the blood of our house. The Duchess studied Marcus with black eyes that seemed to see through to his soul. When she spoke, it was directly to him. Marcus, Chun of Earth, do you understand what you have done? Marcus swallowed hard. Honestly, Your Grace, I'm not sure I understand any of this. A week ago, I was fixing plasma conduits. Now I'm apparently bonded to your daughter, and standing in front of what I'm guessing is the Sanguinari royal family. The younger male made a sound of disgust. Mother, this creature doesn't even comprehend the magnitude of his situation. How can he be worthy of bonding with our bloodline? Marcus felt anger flare through his connection with Lyralii, but this time it was his own anger that surprised him with its intensity. Look, Marcus said, stepping forward despite the obvious danger. I may not understand your politics or your traditions, but I understand one thing perfectly well. I care about your daughter, more than I've ever cared about anyone in my life. She's intelligent, beautiful, kind, and she makes me want to be a better person than I am. If that's not worthy of your respect, then I guess we have different definitions of what matters. The chamber fell silent. The ancient Sanguinari spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of ages. Tell me, young human, what did you feel during the bonding process? Marcus glanced at Lyralii, who nodded encouragingly. It felt like coming home, he said honestly, like finding a part of myself I didn't know was missing. And I could sense her emotions, her memories, her loneliness. She's been carrying the weight of representing your entire species to a galaxy that fears her. That's not fair to anyone. The Ancient One nodded slowly. And what would you sacrifice to protect this bond? The question was clearly a test, but Marcus didn't hesitate. Anything, everything. My career, my life, my future. None of it matters if she's not part of it. The Duchess leaned forward. Even your humanity? The bond changes both participants, Marcus Chun. You will live far longer than any normal human. You will develop abilities that your species considers impossible. Are you prepared to become something more than human? Marcus felt a jolt of surprise. I didn't know that was part of the deal. The soul bond transforms both participants, the Duchess explained. Lyralii will gain some of your emotional resilience and adaptability. You will gain enhanced longevity and psychic sensitivity. You will become something new, something that has never existed before. Marcus looked at Lyralii, seeing the worry in her eyes. Through their bond, he could sense that she hadn't known about the transformation either. Will I still be me? He asked. Yes, the Ancient One replied. But you'll be more than you were. The question is whether you can accept that change. Marcus thought about his simple life, his modest goals, his quiet existence as a maintenance worker. Then he thought about the connection he felt with Lyralii, the sense of purpose and meaning that had entered his life. I've never been anything special, he said finally. I'm not brilliant or heroic or particularly brave. But if bonding with Lyralii makes me more than I am, then I'm grateful for the chance to be worthy of her. The younger male snorted derisively. Pretty words, human. But actions matter more than speeches. Then, let me act, Marcus replied. What do you need me to prove? The Duchess exchanged glances with her advisors. There is something you should know, Marcus-chun. Your bonding with Lyralii has created a diplomatic crisis. The Federation Council is demanding that the bond be severed, claiming it represents a security threat. They are threatening to expel the Sanguinari from the galactic community. Marcus felt ice in his veins. Because of me? Because of fear, the Duchess corrected. Fear of what our species might become if we begin forming bonds with others. Fear of change. What can I do to fix it? There is a gathering of species leaders being convened on the neutral station, Concord 7. You and Lyralii will testify before the Galactic Council about the nature of your bond. They will decide whether to accept it or order its dissolution. Marcus felt Lyralii's fear spike through their connection. What happens if they order dissolution? The ancient Sanguinari's expression grew grim. Soul bonds cannot be severed without destroying both participants. The Council knows this. They are essentially voting on whether you both should live or die. The magnitude of the situation finally hit Marcus fully. An entire galactic government was going to decide the fate of his relationship. And if they decided against him, both he and Lyralii would die. When is this gathering? He asked. In 3 days, the Duchess replied. You will have that long to prepare your testimony. What should I say? I don't know anything about galactic politics or interspecies relations. The younger male leaned forward. Say nothing. Let's handle the diplomacy. You are out of your depth in this arena. Marcus felt a surge of irritation. You know what? I may be out of my depth, but I'm not stupid. And I'm not going to let other people decide my fate without having a say in it. The Duchess studied him with new interest. What would you say to the council, Marcus-chun? Marcus looked around the chamber, at the elegant Sanguinari nobles who held his future in their hands. Then, he looked at Lyralii, drawing strength from their bond. I'd tell them the truth, he said. That love doesn't recognize species boundaries. That connection and understanding are what matter, not fear and prejudice. That the bond between Lyralii and me makes us both stronger, not weaker. And if they don't listen? Marcus grinned, and for the first time since this whole thing started, he felt like himself again. Then, I'll keep talking until they do. I may just be a maintenance worker, but I'm a human maintenance worker. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's being stubborn when it matters. The ancient Sanguinari actually smiled. Perhaps there is wisdom in the choice the ancient powers made. The Duchess stood, her decision clearly made. Very well, Marcus-chun of Earth. You will stand before the Galactic Council as a recognized member of House Nightshade. Whatever the outcome, you will face it with the full support of the Sanguinari people. As the formal audience concluded, Marcus found himself thinking about the incredible chain of events that had led him here. A casual compliment had led to dinner. Dinner had led to bonding. Bonding had led to interstellar politics. But as he walked through the corridors of the Sanguinari flagship with Lyralii at his side, he realized he wouldn't change any of it. For the first time in his life, he was part of something bigger than himself. Something that mattered. 3 days later, as he stood before the assembled representatives of dozens of species in the Grand Hall of Concord 7 Station. Marcus Chun took a deep breath and began to speak. "Honorable delegates," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "My name is Marcus Chun. I'm a maintenance technician from Earth, and I'm here to tell you about love." What followed was the most important speech of his life, delivered not as a diplomat or politician, but as a man who had found something worth fighting for. He spoke about connection across differences, about the courage it takes to embrace the unknown, about the transformative power of genuine understanding. He spoke about how Lyralii had taught him that love wasn't about finding someone exactly like yourself, but about finding someone who made you want to become more than you were. When he finished, the chamber was silent. Then, one by one, delegates began to stand. First the human representative, then others, until the entire assembly was on its feet. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. The bond would be recognized and protected under galactic law, as Marcus and Lyralii embraced in the center of the Great Hall, surrounded by the cheers of beings from across the galaxy. Marcus couldn't help but laugh. Neither did I. And so it was that a maintenance worker from Earth and a princess from the stars changed the course of galactic history. All because sometimes the most important truths are the simplest ones. That connection matters more than difference, that love transcends boundaries, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is speak from the heart, even when the whole galaxy is listening. Their bond would become the first of many between humans and other species, ushering in a new age of understanding and cooperation. But that's another story entirely. This one ends with Marcus and Lyralii walking hand in hand through the gardens of the Sanguinari homeworld, watching eternal twilight paint the sky in shades of purple and gold, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. After all, they had already changed the galaxy. Everything else would be easy by comparison.